In the year 2247, humanity stood on the edge of a new era. Earth had reached out to the stars, forming fragile ties with powerful alien civilizations. Among them was the Galactic Empire, a vast and domineering force that ruled over thousands of star systems. To most humans, the Empire's towering warships and advanced technology were both awe-inspiring and intimidating. But beneath the surface of their alliance lay tension, mistrust, and an unspoken belief by the Empire that humans were nothing more than primitive beings. Ethan Cole, a seasoned diplomat in his mid-40s, was one of the few people who could navigate the delicate relationship between Earth and the Empire. He had spent years learning about alien cultures, studying their languages, and understanding their politics. Now, he found himself stationed aboard a massive orbital station near Jupiter, where representatives from both sides met to discuss trade agreements and territorial disputes. The station buzzed with activity. Humans in simple uniforms walked alongside aliens clad in shimmering robes or metallic armor. Despite the shared space, there was always a quiet divide. Ethan's wife, Laura Bennett, lived with him on the station. She worked as a teacher for the children of human settlers who called the station home. Her classroom was small but filled with warmth, decorated with colorful drawings made by her students. Many of these children were excited to live so close to the Empire's representatives, imagining themselves as explorers or diplomats someday. Laura loved teaching them, even though she worried about the risks they faced living in such a politically charged environment. One day, during a routine meeting, Ethan sat across from Admiral Kel Vorn, the Empire's representative. Vorn was a tall, imposing figure with sharp features and piercing eyes. His voice carried authority, and his presence demanded respect or fear. The two men discussed terms for a new trade agreement, but it quickly became clear that Vorn viewed the talks as little more than a formality. "Your species is fortunate we tolerate your existence," Vorn said coldly, leaning back in his chair. Ethan clenched his jaw, but forced himself to remain calm. Diplomacy required patience, even when facing arrogance. Back at home, Ethan shared his frustrations with Laura. "They don't see us as equals," he muttered, pacing their small quarters. "To them, we're just pests they haven't bothered to exterminate yet." Laura listened quietly, holding a cup of tea in her hands. She understood his anger, but also knew how important his role was. "You're doing everything you can," she said softly. "That's all anyone can ask of you." The next morning, Laura took her students on a field trip to a nearby observation deck. From there, they could look out at the swirling clouds of Jupiter's atmosphere, a breathtaking sight that never failed to amaze them. As the children pressed their faces against the glass, laughing and pointing at the planet below, Laura felt a rare moment of peace. For now, life on the station seemed almost normal. But unknown to everyone, trouble was brewing. Rumors spread among the Imperial envoys about unauthorized movements near restricted zones. Some whispered that certain factions within the Empire saw humanity's growing influence as a threat. Others dismissed these claims as paranoia. What no one realized was that events were about to spiral out of control, and the fragile peace Ethan had worked so hard to maintain would soon be shattered forever. The cultural exchange program was supposed to be a step toward peace. Every month, groups of human children visited Epsilon Station, a neutral zone shared by Earth and the Galactic Empire. It was meant to foster understanding between species, showing that humans were not so different from their alien counterparts. For many of the kids, it was also an adventure, a chance to see strange new worlds and meet beings they'd only read about in books. Mia and Jacob, two siblings who lived on the orbital station near Jupiter, were among the lucky ones chosen for this month's visit. Mia was 8 years old, with bright eyes full of curiosity, while Jacob, 10, liked to act brave, but secretly clung to his sister whenever he felt nervous. Their teacher, Laura Bennett, had encouraged them to join the trip. "It's important to learn about others," she told them before they left. "Who knows? You might make friends." When the shuttle carrying the children arrived at Epsilon Station, they were greeted by Imperial officials. The station itself was enormous, with gleaming corridors and towering ceilings. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, and the air smelled faintly metallic. To the kids, it felt like stepping into another world. They marveled at everything: the alien architecture, the soft hum of technology, and even the strange food served during lunch. For hours, the children explored exhibits showcasing the Empire's history and achievements. They saw holograms of ancient battles, artifacts from distant planets, and models of starships bigger than cities. But as the day wore on, some of the Imperial guides grew impatient. Many of them viewed the event as a waste of time, seeing no value in teaching primitive humans about their culture. A few openly muttered complaints under their breath, though none of the children understood their language. Then, without warning, chaos erupted. A group of Imperial soldiers stormed into the exhibit hall, shouting orders in harsh tones. The children froze, confused and frightened. One soldier pointed at a display case near the back of the room, claiming it contained classified information. No one knew how or why. The case had been opened, but the soldiers didn't care. In their eyes, the humans were guilty until proven innocent. "Stay calm," one of the teachers urged, raising her hands in a gesture of surrender. "These are just children." But the soldiers weren't listening. Without hesitation, they opened fire. Bright flashes of energy lit up the room as screams filled the air. Children scattered, trying to find cover, but there was nowhere to hide. Within moments, the once bright hall turned into a scene of horror. Bodies lay motionless on the floor, and smoke hung heavy in the air. Mia grabbed her brother's hand and pulled him toward a narrow doorway. Together, they crawled through dimly lit maintenance tunnels, hearts pounding. Behind them, the sound of gunfire faded, replaced by eerie silence. When they finally emerged onto a deserted platform, they collapsed, trembling and crying. Only then did they realize they were alone. 2 survivors out of dozens of children. Back on the orbital station, Ethan Cole received the news late that night. His face went pale as he listened to the report from a shaken officer. "There were casualties," the man said hesitantly, unable to meet Ethan's gaze. 2 kids made it out alive. Everyone else. Ethan couldn't speak. He thought of Laura, of the laughter he'd heard coming from her classroom just days ago. How could he tell her what had happened? And how could he face those 2 surviving children, knowing he had failed to protect them? The next morning, Ethan demanded answers from Admiral Calvorn. Standing in the conference room, his fists clenched at his sides, he stared down the Imperial representative. "You call this diplomacy?" Ethan spat, his voice shaking with rage. Those were children. Innocent children. Vorn barely reacted. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he replied, "An unfortunate incident. Your people should have kept their distance from restricted areas." Ethan wanted to scream. Instead, he turned and walked away, vowing silently that this would not go unanswered. Whatever it took, whatever price had to be paid, justice would come. For the children, for Laura, and for all of humanity. Ethan Cole returned to Earth with a heavy heart. The images of the massacre haunted him. Children's faces frozen in fear, their small bodies lying lifeless on the cold floor of Epsilon Station. He carried recordings smuggled out by Mia and Jacob, the 2 survivors, who had managed to capture parts of the attack on a handheld device. Those recordings were his proof, his weapon against the Empire's lies. But as he stepped off the shuttle and into the bustling United Nations Council headquarters, Ethan felt the weight of what lay ahead. The council chamber was packed when Ethan entered. Leaders from every corner of Earth sat around a large circular table, their expressions grim. Screens displayed live feeds from colonies across the solar system, where representatives waited anxiously for updates. Ethan stood at the center of the room, holding a data chip in one hand. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure if he could find the words to describe the horror he had seen. Then he took a deep breath and began. "This is not just an incident," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with pain. "This is a crime. A massacre. He inserted the chip into a console, and the screens flickered to life. The footage showed flashes of chaos, soldiers firing without warning, children running in terror, and the aftermath of destruction. Gasps echoed through the chamber as people watched, some covering their mouths in shock. When the video ended, silence hung over the room like a storm cloud. Laura Bennett sat in the back row, her hands trembling as she clutched the arms of her chair. She had already heard about the tragedy, but seeing it made it real in a way she couldn't escape. Tears streamed down her face as she thought of the students she taught, the laughter that now seemed so distant. After the meeting, she approached Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "How can we fight something like this?" Ethan didn't have an easy answer. He knew declaring war would mean risking everything: Earth's fragile alliances, its resources, and countless lives. But doing nothing felt worse. "We can't let them get away with this," he said firmly. "If we don't stand up now, they'll keep treating us like we're nothing, like our lives don't matter." The council debated for hours. Some argued for diplomacy, believing another round of negotiations might prevent further bloodshed. Others called for immediate retaliation, insisting the empire would only respect strength. Senator Daniel Hayes, a cautious man in his 50s with thinning gray hair, voiced his concerns loudly. "War will destroy us," he exclaimed, slamming his fist on the table. "Do you think we can win against their fleets, their weapons? We're outnumbered and outmatched." But Ethan refused to back down. Standing tall, he addressed the council once more. "I'm not asking you to choose between peace and war," he said. "I'm asking you to choose between survival and extinction. If we stay silent, they'll come for more of our children next time. Is that the future you want?" His words struck a chord. Slowly, the mood in the room shifted. People began nodding, murmuring agreement. Even those who had initially opposed action started to see the truth in Ethan's argument. By the end of the session, a decision was made. Humanity would respond, not with blind rage, but with resolve. They would make the Galactic Empire pay for what it had done. Outside the council chambers, news of the massacre spread quickly. Protests erupted in cities across Earth and its colonies. Crowds gathered in public squares, holding signs that read "Justice for our children" and "No more silence." Laura joined a grassroots movement aimed at supporting military families and raising awareness. She spoke at rallies, sharing stories of her students and urging people to stay united. Her words inspired many, giving them hope even as fear lingered in the air. As days turned into weeks, preparations began. Engineers worked around the clock to upgrade Earth's outdated defense systems. Factories churned out new ships and weapons, while volunteers signed up to join the fight. Ethan threw himself into planning strategies, consulting with military leaders and scientists. He knew the road ahead would be long and painful, but he also knew they couldn't turn back. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in his office, staring at a photo of Laura and the children, he whispered to himself, "This is for you." His voice cracked with emotion, but his resolve remained unshaken. Whatever sacrifices lay ahead, whatever battles they would face, Ethan vowed to protect humanity's future and ensure no child suffered the same fate again. The day came when Ethan Cole stood before the world. Cameras from every corner of Earth and its colonies focused on him as he prepared to deliver a speech that would change the course of history. The United Nations Council had agreed. Humanity would no longer bow to the cruelty of the Galactic Empire. It was time to fight back, not just for revenge, but for survival. Ethan knew his words would carry weight, but he also understood the risks. Declaring war meant stepping into the unknown, where victory was uncertain and failure meant extinction. Ethan walked onto the stage, wearing a simple suit with a pin on his lapel, a small Earth insignia. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the blue-green planet humanity called home. He looked out at the crowd gathered in the square below, thousands of people holding banners and flags. Beyond them, billions more watched from their homes, workplaces, and ships orbiting Earth. For a moment, Ethan felt overwhelmed by the responsibility resting on his shoulders. Then he took a deep breath and began to speak. "Today," he said, his voice strong and clear, "we stand united. Today, we say enough is enough." The crowd grew silent, hanging on every word. "The Galactic Empire has shown us who they truly are. They have taken our children. They have spilled innocent blood, and they have told us we are weak, that we are nothing. But I am here to tell you, they are wrong." Ethan paused, letting his words sink in. His eyes scanned the faces in front of him, seeing determination mixed with fear. He thought of Mia and Jacob, the two young survivors whose bravery had inspired so many. He thought of Laura, who had lost students she loved like her own. And he thought of all the families grieving across the galaxy. "We are not weak," Ethan continued. "We are human. We are builders, dreamers, fighters. We have faced challenges before, and we will face this one together. From this moment forward, we declare total war against the Galactic Empire. Not for hatred, but for justice. Not for power, but for peace." As he spoke, the screen behind him changed. Images of the massacre at Epsilon Station appeared. Children running, soldiers firing, the aftermath of devastation. The crowd gasped, some crying openly. Ethan let the truth speak for itself, knowing it would ignite a fire in the hearts of those watching. When the images faded, he raised his fist in the air. "For our children, for our future, for Earth." The response was deafening. Cheers erupted from the crowd, echoing through the square and spreading across the globe. People chanted Ethan's name, waving flags and banners. On distant colonies, workers stopped what they were doing to watch the broadcast, their faces filled with hope and resolve. Even soldiers stationed on remote outposts felt a surge of pride, knowing their mission mattered. But not everyone celebrated. In the shadows of Earth's political chambers, whispers of doubt lingered. Senator Daniel Hayes sat in his office, staring at a blank wall. He had opposed the declaration of war, fearing humanity's destruction. Now, as he listened to the roar of approval outside, he couldn't shake the feeling that disaster loomed ahead. "This will end badly," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Meanwhile, news of Earth's defiance reached the Galactic Empire. Admiral Calvorn watched the broadcast with cold indifference, his sharp features betraying no emotion. To him, humanity's boldness was laughable, an act of desperation from a species too foolish to accept its place. "They think they can challenge us." Vorn sneered to his aides. "Let them try. We will crush them like insects." Back on Earth, Laura Bennett joined a rally in the city square. She held a sign with pictures of her students, their smiling faces bright against the dark backdrop of tragedy. As Ethan's words played over loudspeakers, tears streamed down her cheeks. For the first time since the massacre, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, humanity could rise above its pain and prove the Empire wrong. That night, Ethan returned to his office, exhausted but resolute. He stared at the photo of Laura and the children once more, whispering softly, "This is just the beginning." Outside, the lights of Earth's cities burned brightly, a symbol of unity and defiance. Humanity had declared war, and though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: they would not go down without a fight. Ethan knew humanity couldn't win this war alone. The Galactic Empire was vast, with fleets of starships and weapons far beyond anything Earth could produce. To stand a chance, they needed allies, others who had suffered under the Empire's rule and might be willing to fight back. With the Council's approval, Ethan set out on a mission to rally support from alien factions scattered across the galaxy. It was a risky plan, but it was their only hope. His first stop was a distant system known as the Crimson Expanse, home to the Crimson Vanguard, a rogue mercenary fleet infamous for its daring raids and fierce independence. The Vanguard operated outside Imperial control, taking jobs from anyone who paid well. Their leader, Captain Sofia Alvarez was a human woman in her late 30s with a reputation for being both cunning and ruthless. Ethan had heard stories about her, how she once led a small crew to destroy an entire Imperial supply convoy. But he also knew she wasn't the type to join a cause out of sympathy. He would have to convince her that helping humanity aligned with her own interests. When Ethan arrived aboard the Vanguard's flagship, he was greeted by armed guards who escorted him to the bridge. Sophia stood at the center of the room, surrounded by screens displaying maps of nearby star systems. Her dark hair was tied back, and her sharp eyes studied Ethan as he entered. "So, you're the diplomat," she said, crossing her arms. "What do you want?" Ethan didn't waste time. He explained the massacre at Epsilon Station, showing her the recordings Mia and Jacob had captured. "The Empire thinks it can do whatever it wants," he said. "If we don't stop them now, no one will be safe. Not humans, not aliens, not even mercenaries like you." Sophia listened silently, her expression unreadable. When Ethan finished, she turned away, pacing slowly. "Why should I care?" she asked finally. "Your war isn't my problem." "It is your problem," Ethan replied firmly. "The Empire crushes anyone who stands in its way. You've seen what they do to weaker species. If they defeat us, they'll come for you next. But if we work together, we can weaken them enough to make them think twice before attacking anyone else." For a long moment, Sophia said nothing. Then she stopped pacing and looked at Ethan. "You're asking me to risk everything, for people I don't even know." "I'm asking you to fight for survival," Ethan countered. "Yours and ours." After what felt like hours, Sophia nodded. "Fine. We'll help, but don't expect us to die for you." With the Crimson Vanguard on board, Ethan traveled to other systems, seeking more allies. He met with leaders of oppressed alien species, the Zarnik, a reptilian race forced into labor camps; the Valens, peaceful beings whose homeworld had been stripped of resources; and the Korthans, warriors who despised the Empire's tyranny. Each group had its own reasons for hating the Empire, and each agreed to join the coalition. Slowly but surely, Ethan built a united front. Back on Earth, preparations continued. Engineers worked tirelessly to upgrade outdated defense grids, while factories churned out new ships and weapons. Laura threw herself into organizing support efforts, rallying volunteers to aid military families and raise funds for the war effort. She spoke at rallies, sharing stories of resilience and courage. "We may be small," she told the crowds, "but together, we are strong." As the coalition grew stronger, so did the Empire's response. Imperial patrols increased near human territories, and rumors spread of an impending attack. Ethan knew time was running out. The Empire wouldn't wait forever. They would strike soon, aiming to crush humanity before the coalition could fully mobilize. One evening, Ethan met with Sophia aboard her ship to discuss strategy. They pored over star charts, planning their first major offensive against an Imperial supply depot orbiting Alpha Centauri. "This will be our test," Ethan said. "If we succeed, it'll send a message to the Empire and to anyone still on the fence." Sophia smirked. "A message written in fire." Ethan smiled faintly, though his mind was heavy with the stakes ahead. They were about to take their first real step toward freedom or disaster. Whatever happened, there was no turning back now. Humanity had chosen to fight, and Ethan intended to see it through. The plan was risky, but it had to work. The coalition's first major offensive targeted an Imperial supply depot orbiting Alpha Centauri, a critical hub for the Empire's logistics network. If they could destroy it, they would cripple the Empire's ability to resupply its fleets in nearby systems. It was a bold move, one that required precision, coordination, and a lot of luck. Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of the Crimson Vanguard's flagship, watching as Captain Sofia Alvarez gave final orders to her crew. "Remember," Sofia said, addressing the team of pilots and engineers gathered around her, "this isn't just about hitting them hard. It's about sending a message. Show them we're not afraid." Ethan nodded in agreement. He knew this mission wasn't just about weakening the Empire. It was about proving humanity and its allies could fight back. Success would inspire others to join their cause. Failure would crush morale and leave Earth even more vulnerable than before. The attack began under the cover of darkness, or what passed for darkness in space. A small fleet of ships, led by the Crimson Vanguard, approached the depot from multiple angles. Imperial patrols were light in this sector, likely because the Empire didn't expect anyone to challenge them so far from Earth. Still, the Coalition forces moved cautiously, using cloaking technology borrowed from alien allies to stay hidden until the last possible moment. As they neared the depot, Ethan watched the screens intently. His heart pounded as he saw the massive structure come into view. A sprawling complex of storage units, fuel tanks, and docking bays. Dozens of cargo ships floated nearby, loading supplies destined for Imperial warships. "This is it," Ethan whispered to himself. At Sophia's command, the Coalition ships dropped their cloaks and launched the assault. Lasers streaked through space, striking the depot's defenses. The element of surprise gave them an advantage, catching the Imperial forces off guard. Explosions lit up the area as fuel tanks ignited, sending shockwaves rippling through the station. Pilots shouted updates over comms, coordinating their movements to maximize damage while avoiding enemy fire. But the Empire wasn't helpless. Reinforcements arrived quickly, deploying fighters to counterattack. The battle turned chaotic, with ships weaving through debris and exchanging fire at close range. Ethan gripped the railing on the bridge, his knuckles white as he watched the screens. Ships on both sides were lost, their crews sacrificed in the heat of combat. Despite the losses, the Coalition pressed on, determined to complete the mission. Finally, after what felt like hours, the depot collapsed in a blinding explosion. The remaining Imperial forces retreated, leaving the Coalition victorious. But battered, cheers erupted on the bridge of the Crimson Vanguard, though they were tempered by the knowledge of how much had been lost. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of the brave men and women who wouldn't return home. Victory came at a cost, and he felt every ounce of it. Back on Earth, news of the successful operation spread quickly. People celebrated in the streets, waving flags and chanting slogans. Laura Bennett watched the broadcasts with tears in her eyes, proud of what humanity had achieved, but mourning the lives lost. She visited a memorial wall where names of fallen soldiers were being added daily, touching the engraved letters of friends she'd never see again. Meanwhile, Admiral Cal Vorn received the report of the depot's destruction with barely contained fury. "They dare defy us," he snarled, slamming his fist on a table. "Send reinforcements to Alpha Centauri. I want those rebels hunted down and exterminated." For now, the Coalition had struck a blow against the Empire, but Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The Empire wouldn't forgive such an insult, and retaliation would come swiftly. Still, as he looked at the faces of his comrades aboard the Vanguard, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had proven they could win, even against overwhelming odds. And that meant everything. As the Coalition celebrated their victory at Alpha Centauri, tensions began to rise within humanity's leadership. The war was far from over, and not everyone agreed on how to proceed. Senator Daniel Hayes, a cautious man who had opposed the declaration of war from the start, grew increasingly vocal in his criticism of Ethan Cole's strategies. He argued that the attack on the supply depot would provoke the Empire into retaliating with even greater force, potentially dooming Earth. "We're playing with fire," Hayes warned during a council meeting. "Every battle we win brings us closer to annihilation." Ethan listened patiently, though his patience was wearing thin. "War is never safe," he replied calmly. "But doing nothing is just as dangerous. If we stop fighting now, the Empire will crush us completely." Hayes shook his head, his face flushed with frustration. "You're risking everything on reckless gambles. What happens when the Empire sends its full fleet against us? How will we survive then?" The debate dragged on, dividing the council. Some supported Ethan, believing bold actions were necessary to keep the Empire on the defensive. Others sided with Hayes, fearing the cost of continued conflict would outweigh any potential gains. Amid the arguing, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Hayes seemed too determined to undermine the war effort, almost as if he had another agenda. That suspicion deepened when Ethan received an anonymous tip about unusual activity involving Hayes. Late one night, Ethan decided to investigate. Using his access to secure communications logs, he discovered encrypted messages between Hayes and an unknown sender. With help from a trusted technician, Ethan decrypted the files. What he found shocked him. Hayes had been secretly communicating with Imperial agents, offering classified information about Earth's defenses in exchange for promises of leniency once the Empire regained control. Betrayal cut deep, but Ethan knew he couldn't act rashly. He gathered evidence and presented it to the Council in a closed-door session. When confronted, Hayes tried to deny the accusations, but the proof was undeniable. "I did it for Earth," he shouted, his voice trembling. "This war will destroy us all." "You betrayed us," Ethan said coldly. "You put billions of lives at risk for your own survival." Hayes was arrested immediately, but the damage was done. His betrayal sowed distrust among key figures in the coalition. Some questioned whether there were other spies within their ranks, while others feared the Empire might already know their plans. Morale suffered, and cracks began to form in the unity Ethan had worked so hard to build. Despite the setback, Ethan refused to let doubt consume him. He called an emergency meeting with Captain Sofia Alvarez and other coalition leaders to reinforce their commitment to the cause. "We can't afford to fall apart now," he told them. "The Empire thrives on division. If we turn on each other, they win." Sofia nodded, her expression grim. "He's right. We need to stay focused. The Empire isn't going to wait for us to sort out our problems. They'll strike as soon as they see weakness." To rebuild trust, Ethan proposed a new initiative, sharing intelligence openly among all coalition members. It was a risky move, as it meant exposing vulnerabilities, but he believed transparency was the only way to counteract the Empire's attempts to divide them. Slowly, the coalition began to recover, though scars remained. Back on Earth, Laura Bennett noticed the change in Ethan when he returned home briefly. He looked exhausted, his eyes heavy with worry. She didn't ask for details. He rarely spoke about classified matters, but she could see the weight of leadership pressing down on him. "You're doing the best you can," she said softly, holding his hand. "That's all anyone can ask of you." Ethan managed a weak smile. "I just hope it's enough." The war raged on, and challenges mounted. But even in the face of betrayal and uncertainty, Ethan held on to one truth. Humanity's fight for survival was far from over. They had proven they could stand against the Empire, and that gave him hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together, or not at all. The coalition's next move was bold and dangerous, a direct assault on the Empire's central command hub, located deep within enemy territory. The command hub was the nerve center of the Galactic Empire's operations, a fortress-like structure that controlled communications, logistics, and military coordination across thousands of star systems. If they could disable it, even temporarily, it would leave the Empire blind and vulnerable. Ethan Cole knew this mission would be their greatest challenge yet, but also their best chance to turn the tide of the war. Ethan worked closely with Captain Sofia Alvarez and a team of elite operatives to plan every detail. They studied maps, analyzed patrol routes, and identified weak points in the hub's defenses. The mission required precision and stealth. Any mistake would mean disaster. "This isn't just about bravery," Ethan told the team during a briefing. "It's about timing. We hit them fast, hard, and then get out." The operation began under the cover of darkness. A small strike force, including Ethan himself, boarded cloaked shuttles and slipped past Imperial patrols. The journey was tense, with everyone knowing they were flying into the heart of enemy territory. As they approached the command hub, Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. Once inside the hub, the team split into smaller groups, each tasked with disabling key systems. Ethan led one group to the main control room, where they encountered heavy resistance. Imperial guards fired relentlessly, forcing the team to take cover behind consoles and walls. Ethan stayed focused, shouting orders and returning fire when necessary. For a man who had spent most of his life negotiating peace, he moved with surprising calm under pressure. Meanwhile, Sophia and her squad sabotaged power generators and communication arrays, plunging parts of the hub into chaos. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed as Imperial forces scrambled to respond. Despite the odds, the Coalition fighters pushed forward, driven by determination and the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. In the control room, Ethan faced a final challenge, overriding the security protocols to shut down the hub's core systems. He worked quickly, his fingers flying over the alien interface as alarms screamed around him. Sweat dripped from his brow, but he didn't stop. Finally, with a triumphant beep, the system went dark. The hub's defenses collapsed, cutting off the Empire's ability to coordinate its fleets in nearby sectors. As the team regrouped and prepared to evacuate, Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had done it. They had struck a crippling blow to the Empire. But there was no time to celebrate. Reinforcements were already on the way, and the shuttle bay was swarming with enemy troops. The escape was harrowing, with the team narrowly avoiding capture as they raced back to their ships. When they finally emerged from enemy space, cheers erupted aboard the Crimson Vanguard. News of the successful mission spread quickly, inspiring hope across Earth and its allies. For the first time since the war began, victory seemed possible. Rebels and oppressed systems rose up against Imperial rule, emboldened by the Coalition's success. Even neutral factions started reconsidering their stance, seeing humanity as a real threat to the Empire's dominance. Back on Earth, Laura watched the reports with tears in her eyes. She thought of Ethan risking his life for a better future. Though she worried constantly, she couldn't help feeling proud of what he, and all of humanity, had achieved. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted. The Empire was no longer untouchable. And for Ethan, that gave him the strength to keep fighting, no matter what lay ahead. The final battle was coming. After months of planning, sacrifices, and relentless fighting, the Coalition gathered every available ship for a climactic assault on the Empire's capital world, a heavily fortified planet known as Vornaxis. It was the heart of the Galactic Empire, home to its rulers, its military command, and its most advanced defenses. If they could take Vornaxis, they could end the war once and for all. But everyone knew it would be the hardest fight they had ever faced. Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of the Crimson Vanguard, watching as hundreds of ships assembled in orbit around Earth. The fleet was a patchwork of human vessels, alien cruisers, and retrofitted freighters, all united by a shared purpose. Pilots checked their weapons, engineers made last-minute repairs, and soldiers prepared themselves mentally for what lay ahead. Ethan felt a mix of pride and dread as he looked out at the massive armada. This was humanity's moment, but it might also be its end. Captain Sofia Alvarez gave a short speech to her crew before the attack began. "Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has suffered under the Empire," she said, her voice steady and clear. "They've taken too much from us. It's time to take it back." As the fleet approached Vornaxis, the scale of the Empire's defenses became clear. Massive orbital platforms bristled with cannons, while fleets of starships patrolled the skies. The planet itself glowed faintly beneath layers of energy shields, designed to repel any invasion. Ethan clenched his fists as he watched the screens. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but retreat wasn't an option. The battle began with a fierce exchange of fire. Imperial ships launched waves of fighters, targeting the Coalition fleet with precision. Explosions lit up space as ships on both sides were destroyed. Ethan stayed on the front lines, coordinating attacks and encouraging his comrades even as chaos erupted around him. He could feel the vibrations of impacts through the hull of the Vanguard, hear the shouts of pilots over comms, and see flashes of light as lasers streaked past the windows. Amid the chaos, Mia and Jacob, the two young survivors of the Epsilon Station massacre, were brought aboard a nearby cruiser to witness the fight. They had grown close to Ethan during the war, seeing him as a symbol of hope. Now, dressed in simple uniforms, they stood side by side, watching the battle unfold. Their presence inspired the troops, reminding them why they were fighting. When one soldier hesitated, unsure if he could keep going, he saw Mia's determined face and found new strength. The turning point came when Ethan led a daring strike team to disable the planet's energy shields. Flying a small shuttle through enemy fire, they reached the shield generator and planted explosives. The explosion sent shockwaves rippling across the planet's surface, leaving it exposed to attack. Cheers erupted across the Coalition fleet as they pushed forward, breaking through the Empire's outer defenses. Inside the Imperial Palace, Admiral Cal Vorn watched the battle unfold with growing panic. His once invincible empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "This isn't possible," he muttered, slamming his fist on a console. But deep down, he knew the truth. Humanity had proven stronger than anyone expected. Back on the Vanguard, Ethan felt a surge of hope as the Coalition forces gained ground. Victory was within reach, but it came at a cost. Ships burned in the void, and names were added to the memorial wall back on Earth. Laura thought of those lost, her heart heavy but full of resolve. She had faith that Ethan and the others were fighting for something greater than themselves. As the battle raged on, Ethan whispered to himself, "For our children, for our future." He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. Humanity would never give up. Not now. Not ever. The war ended with the Empire's unconditional surrender. After days of relentless fighting, the Coalition forces overwhelmed Fornaxis, forcing the Imperial leaders to admit defeat. Admiral Cal Vorn was captured, his face pale, and his pride shattered as he signed the terms of surrender aboard the Crimson Vanguard. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Empire was no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. Humanity and its allies had won, not just a battle, but a new chance at peace. Ethan Cole stood in the center of the crowded chamber where the treaty was being signed. His uniform was worn, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes sparkled with quiet triumph. Around him, representatives from across the galaxy gathered, human diplomats, alien leaders, and rebel factions who had fought side by side. The room buzzed with cautious optimism, though no one forgot the sacrifices that had brought them here. Ethan stepped forward to address the assembly, his voice steady despite the weight of everything he had endured. "This victory belongs to all of us," he began, looking around the room. "But it is not just for us. It is for every child who lost their life, every family torn apart, and every world crushed under the Empire's rule. We have shown that even the smallest voices can rise up and change the galaxy." The treaty outlined strict reparations for the victims of the Empire's crimes. Resources would be redistributed to rebuild devastated planets, and oppressed species would finally gain autonomy. Most importantly, the Empire agreed to dismantle its war machine and submit to oversight by a newly formed Galactic Council, a body designed to ensure fairness and prevent future tyranny. Ethan had insisted on these terms, knowing they were essential for lasting peace. Back on Earth, Laura Bennett felt a wave of relief wash over her as she watched the signing ceremony on a public screen. She thought of the students she had lost, the family she had comforted, and the countless lives changed forever by the war. Though pain lingered, she also felt hope. For the first time in years, she could imagine a future where children grew up free from fear, a future where humanity stood tall among the stars. Mia and Jacob, now seen as symbols of resilience, joined Laura at a memorial service held in honor of those who had died. The event drew crowds from across the planet, people coming together to grieve and celebrate. As Mia placed a flower on the memorial wall, she whispered, "We did it." Jacob nodded, holding back tears. They had survived the worst, and now they could dream of something better. Ethan returned home shortly after the treaty was signed. He walked through the streets of his hometown, seeing banners and smiling faces everywhere. People thanked him, called him a hero, but Ethan didn't feel like one. He thought of the friends he had lost, the battles that still haunted his dreams, and the heavy responsibility of leadership. When he finally reached his house, Laura greeted him with open arms. For a moment, they simply held each other, letting the silence speak for everything they had been through. In the weeks that followed, Ethan threw himself into rebuilding efforts. He worked closely with alien leaders to establish the Galactic Council, ensuring humanity played a key role in shaping the galaxy's future. Laura dedicated herself to creating schools for displaced children, teaching them about unity, empathy, and the power of standing together. Slowly, the scars of war began to heal. One evening, Ethan sat outside under the stars, thinking about how far they had come. The galaxy was still broken in many ways, but there was light where once there had only been darkness. He remembered the faces of the children at Epsilon Station, their laughter silenced too soon. Then he thought of Mia and Jacob, their courage a reminder that hope could survive even in the darkest times. "We did it," he murmured to himself, staring at the night sky. "Not perfectly, but we did it." Whatever challenges lay ahead, humanity had proven it could endure. And as long as people like Ethan and Laura kept working toward a better future, the galaxy had a chance to heal and thrive.